We're recording today on the lands of the Yuggera people, and we acknowledge the traditional owners past and present. Hello, I'm Andrea. I'm a former registered nurse and midwife and a community advocate. Welcome to Beyond the Rona.
And I'm Tim. I'm a digital marketer and small business owner, and we're on a journey here to find out what our community members think are the big problems and the big solutions as we emerge from the pandemic.
So we're doing our recap episode now, looking back on, who we've had on the show and kind of what we've learned and where we are at the moment in this journey as we head into the election period. So I guess maybe we'll have a look back first on what we've learned and who we've interviewed. Maybe that's a good way of kind of getting things started. So we started off, I guess, with this season with Jackie Skeen talking about the, housing from the rental perspective. From the landlord's perspective. What did you think about what Jackie had to say, Tim?
I think, it was really good because we don't, being on, I guess, the other side of the market in terms of our politics, we don't get to hear a lot about, the issues that face her industry, real estate industry, her clients, landlords, and we need to remember that there are a lot of homeowners in Logan, and that they also experience the housing crisis differently. So I think it was a really good way to just gain a bit of empathy around what are their challenges, and also though what are the solutions that they see, because I think a lot of homeowners realize that there is a inherent problem with the housing market, and I think that always comes out when they talk about their children. I own a house now, but I'm concerned about my kids.
Absolutely.
And so there is a shared sense that there's a big problem here. How do we solve it? And also, I think some of the solutions that Jackie mentioned about, some of the regulations, the red tape that are limiting capacity and supply, especially in the rental market.
Yeah.
Some of those things perhaps could be addressed, and I think that they were good ideas.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, one of the things that she did mention was building in underneath houses. There's good and bad with that. Obviously, one thing is that if people were able to build in underneath their houses, we have a lot of houses that were built in sort of, 1970, 1980. They're kind of these block double brick houses, and they were kind of all built pretty much the same, 3 bedrooms upstairs, and downstairs was the double garage. So a lot of people did build underneath, but they're not legal ceiling height. And she sort of touched on the fact that this could be a solution, maybe for disabled people as well, because that's ground level. So maybe I think the ceiling height has to be maybe 2.3 or 2.4, maybe 2.4 it has to be to actually say that that's a livable area. Otherwise, it's only classed as storage space. But if you could maybe change that in legislation to, to bring that down to maybe 2.2, I think, which is generally the ceiling height that most of these 1980s houses has, maybe that could be a living area for everybody. It could be an area that disabled people could live in as well, or elderly people, people with mobility issues. So it is a good idea. I think we have to be careful though of, maybe flood prone areas, because we have got this problem now of, what are we doing are we going to rebuild now, where these places, because of climate change and no action on climate change, we have got a lot of houses that we're thinking, okay, are we going to rebuild all these houses that continue to be flooded over and over and over again? So, she had a good idea there of building in underneath these places, but, are we, what are we going to do about constant climate change where no action has ever been done on this problem?
So on that point about climate, we saw as well in northern New South Wales recently about how they had just recovered from flooding. They had just been flooded again, like literally days later. And, sure, it's part of the same weather event, but the main point is that this is just going to keep getting worse. And, people, some conversation on Twitter has been like, people shouldn't be living in these areas, but it's like, these are people's homes. And I think there isn't enough like understanding about the fact that it's very hard for a lot of people to just like uproot their lives and go somewhere else. And, indeed, in some instances they're going to have to, but it's just like the displacement is so bad. And when you see actually how people have been living through, if you can even call it that, in their cars, in, shelters, it looks like the vision looks like a third world country. It's like, this is Australia. How has the response been so bad to this situation? So yeah, it's really dire. Yeah,
it is. And one of the other things that Jackie mentioned was the lack of infrastructure. So not only do we have a problem with housing for people, and along with that, with really, poor policy that's happened by having a government that really only cares about their corporate interests. And they've made, with all of their policies that have been done to the working class people over the past 20 years, we've had this divide between the rich and the poor. And, what they've done is actually push up the cost of housing now and made it just so unreachable for people. But now they're making these little pockets of housing that might be affordable for some, but where they do those pockets of housing, they haven't done the infrastructure to go with it. So you have these bottlenecks of roads to try to get to these pockets of housing out at places like Yarrabilba and, places like that. And we've had Jackie talk about that, but we've also had lots of community members talk about the fact that they can't get, to their house and to their jobs and things like that because, governments just haven't coordinated this infrastructure to deal with that. Sure, you can build a pocket of cheap housing, which is, it's all slapped together. They're all like put right next to each other with no eaves. There's no thought about cooling for the houses. They chop all the trees down in the whole area. It's terrible the way that they build housing for people that really can't afford, decent housing. But there's no infrastructure either. So
yeah, and what it gives council is this, tick. We've delivered housing. We've like greenlit all this housing. Look at how it's going to help the economy. Like, it's just one thing in terms of like their short-term planning and a short-term goal that they can tick off and take that to their next election and just say, look at what we've delivered. But all of that long-term planning around the infrastructure and how are people going to actually live good lives in these areas, that's not a box that needs to be ticked.
No.
It's just purely delivering numbers of new roofs,
No. And the other thing she talked about was the relationship between landlords and tenants. And that's something that I think needs a lot of improvement. We have obviously got a movement now of people who want to join unions, like rental unions, to try to gain some empowerment because of the lack of housing, we've got this kind of imbalance between, people who are desperate for housing, and we've had like a rise of rents happen. And so they're too afraid, like the renters are too afraid to say something like, there's plumbing that needs to be done at this house, or the place is covered in mold, or, this is broken or whatever. They're too afraid to say anything because then they get evicted, or they're being evicted without notice, or people are evicting them because they want to sell their property because of the massive rise in house prices. And once they're evicted, they're homeless, so we've got like unprecedented numbers of homeless people. It's terrible what's happening. And, that kind of led us on to, Andrew from Secure. That was good, wasn't it? Talking to him.
It was really good. Yeah, and this they're a new organisation, and they're not the first renters union, but what we learned, I think, from him was, like with all unions, and the purpose of a union is that you are stronger together. And I did see, just following on from our conversation, I was following some of Secure's posts, and I saw that they were highlighting an issue where someone had been, as you just said, evicted, like no grounds evictions, which I might add is perfectly fine and legal in the state of Queensland. Was evicted, and then the union was able to band together and resolve the problem and get that tenant into a new place. And I just thought, where you've got that kind of power in a collective, then you can achieve things, and it doesn't have to be, that single situation is certainly like a good example, but ultimately, it moves the dial when more and more and more renters join their union, because they can actually start to affect policy and be a bigger force and actually get some of the changes that we need, like capping rent increases and stopping rent bidding, again, like all things that are allowed currently.
Yeah, it was really good to know about that, and I've actually let other people know since I've talked to him. If they've had rental problems, I've been able to say, oh, you should join a rental union. I really didn't know about that. Yeah. It's really, like, unions are good, aren't they? They kind of give you a little bit of empowerment. I knew when at work, I knew that a union was good when you're working, because you can collect people together and have some sort of power. But I didn't realize that there was rental unions as well. I didn't know that. So it was good.
Oh, I didn't know either. I mean, I think it was a really good learning. Yeah, that was great to hear the work they're doing.
Yeah. And then, of course, Ben from Chasing Rainbows. That was a good one.
Yeah, it was excellent. And I think, this one was pretty, close to my experience in my life, being kind of a startup founder and going through the process. When you're starting a new company or a small business and you need capital, you need some dollars to whatever kind of small business you're creating, you usually need some funds. Like you can absolutely start from zero and build from there, but it's a slog. And so for a lot of younger founders, they look for that first lot of money, like it's some investment money. And I think the thing that I learned that was very interesting about what Ben was talking about was that his fund is there to represent underrepresented founders, especially in the LGBTIQ plus community. And that what he said about when founders come out, they lose that ability to raise from friends and family, because friends and family is kind of like a common source of initial investment. And I just thought that is just an area that I, wasn't really aware of. And it's so good that, what Ben is doing and now there's others in the space as well that are trying to address all of these imbalances. And there are imbalances everywhere, but in the tech industry, unfortunately, there's a lot. There's gender imbalance. It's very unfair, I would say. And I think that what Ben is doing is really trying to level the playing field for those that are underrepresented.
Yeah, I really love the way that, technology can help in so many different ways. Like, I'm loving learning about this. It's all new to me, as you've learnt. And it's, I just find it like, it's really exciting to me to think, wow, this is something we can actually do. Like when COVID happened, how we actually can work from home. Like Ben was saying, you don't have to, you can actually be a founder anywhere. Like you can be living on a boat. Like you can be anywhere and run a business with technology. Like it's fantastic. And like as a disabled person now, I was really worried because I have a progressive nerve disease. I think one of the very first things I was worried about, because I talk a lot, and so I remember ringing up another guy. He's actually an Olympian, and I rang him up when I found out I had this nerve disease. His name's Jeff Trappett, and so he's really, really busy actually. But I rang him up and I said, I was crying on the phone, and I said, what if I can't talk anymore? Like that was one of my big problems, And I was like, oh my God, what if I can't talk? What am I going to do? Like this was like just devastating to me, And he was like in the middle of meetings and busy, and he's like, I'm sure you can find a way. Yes, he did. He said, there's people out there who get an iPad and they can use technology and they can put what they want to say into the iPad, and then the iPad will speak for you. And like that just totally calmed me down. I was like, okay, then I think I can do it, But it was like I was just beside myself because I just didn't know what I was going to do if I couldn't talk. Like, how am I gonna express myself? Like I was just like terrified, But this is the thing, technology can come and it can help us. But unless you know that, unless you know what it can do for you, then, you're kind of lost. So I think it was really good hearing from Ben that, there's ways that you don't have to live in the old way where you leave school, you get a job and you work your butt off until, you become like that old guy that cornered Scott Morrison and said, I've been in the mines for 30 years and now I'm a pensioner, I thought he was going to punch on with Scott Morrison at that press interview.
You work it out, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 years. What's that work out? That's how much money I've saved the government.
Well, look, sir, I'm happy to pass in.
Hey, you ring your mobs up and you don't even return the call.
You've come here to...
I don't give a shit about you. You're getting... Hey, I'm paying a death tax every week. Remember you went to the last election tax? Well, I'm paying it because I've taken 200 out of my pension every week.
This is what we should do. You raised two very important issues, one on an immigration matter and one on your...
Yes.
So let's sit down with one of my team.
All right. Now, who can I contact tomorrow?
Yeah, well, you can sit down with
Hey,
them right
I'm doing
now.
this before the election, mate, because this is two promises that you made. You know another promise that you made?
Okay, well, look, we've had quite a chat.
Hey, yeah, no, you got to have an integrity commission. Hey, I've been to welfare rights, everything. You got the foxes looking after the hen houses.
Jack is going to sit down with you.
What? Yeah.
Jack works for me.
Hey, you better fucking do something. I don't care.
That moment, I feel like that was a huge moment. You know how like in election campaigns, there's always these moments that people remember, and it might be a photo or it might be a little few seconds of a clip. Like in 2019, that Shorten eating the snag from the middle. Like I feel like that moment really like stuck, in people's minds for better or worse. But I feel like in this time, that this moment where basically this is the government's base, like pensioners are, some of the highest supporters of the Liberal Party, and here we have a very angry pensioner in Newcastle cornering the Prime Minister. I think that's a really bad sign for the government. Like I think all this talk about how, it's going to be very close, like that's their base. And
yeah,
I just think that is really, they're in big trouble. I think they're in big trouble.
They are. You and I were talking about it before, but I sort of got that, I felt emotional watching that old guy corner him, because I felt like this is so out of character for an elderly guy to speak like that to the Prime Minister. I mean, for me, I have no qualms talking to the Prime Minister and telling him that he did a bad job. And there's other videos of people telling the Prime Minister, that he did a bad job. But for an elderly guy, I feel like it's out of character, and it's, that's just not manners. And we were brought up like that you don't speak like that to the Prime Minister of Australia. And so for him to actually do that, I think, oh my goodness, like you have made the elderly people mad, you know? That's big.
Yeah. It's really huge. I think this could be like one of the biggest moments of the campaign. And the campaign hasn't actually even started.
No, it hasn't.
But maybe like we're recording on Friday, but who knows what will happen on the weekend. But like I'm picking that's going to be a huge moment that might be remembered come polling day.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the world, like, I mean, not the world, this is my world, but we're in a really bad state at the moment. I mean, we've had the lowest interest rates, like, forever. I think the RBA kept it at 0.1%. We've got these petrol costs that, you know, people are saying they need a loan to even fill up their car with petrol. You know, the rising costs of living that people are struggling to afford, you know, just basic food. I went down and visited the Logan Community Centre the other day. They're fully self-funded, and they have 50 to 60 families every single week come down there just to have a meal, just to have a hot meal, right? And then every single day they're giving out food packages and letting people come down and have a shower and give them toiletries and things like that. Like, you know, these people are hungry. Like, you can't even if you're on Job Seeker, it's so far below the poverty line that people can't even afford to pay for food. Like, why would you have your country in poverty? Why? What do you possibly gain from having so many people in poverty? And they say that Job Seeker and these welfare payments are only to give you like a hand up, not a handout. But it's not a hand up if you're in poverty and you can't eat. Like, if you've either got to make the choice between, you can't feed your children. Like, it's so far down below the poverty line. Like, you have to make a choice between medication or food or rent. Like, if you're choosing between those things, you're actually killing your people. You're not giving them a hand up. You're actually being cruel, you know? It's terrible.
Well, at least all that money going to the submarines will help. So, you know.
Exactly. And I know, that was my next point. I mean, why is he concentrating so much on the army? You know, everything seems to be like, and he didn't do a good job with being diplomatic with the other countries either. You know, he pissed off the French government and pissed off the Chinese government. I mean, they don't like him either. He didn't do a good job.
And just on that point about the Liberal Prime Minister, an ABC reporter was talking about how this is actually the first time we're going to vote in a very long time where the Prime Minister has had a full term. And this is another really, really big point, is that, you know, with the knifing that's been happening in both Labor and Liberal over time, there's always been like this rejuvenation of the party so that when they go to the polls, there's someone new. And now we don't have that. And Scott Morrison is going to the polls on a full term. And this is the first time in a long time that we're going to be, having to assess his performance. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, just kind of coming back to Ben, I think people have really done their best to survive under this government. And that tends to be what it is. It's survival rather than living your best life. And so part of that survival is trying to set up your own business, you know, because, you know, then just not surviving going and working for someone else because wages are so low, you know, and employers can't afford to pay more wages. So then people are setting up their own business and thinking, okay, well, if I set up my own business, maybe I can achieve work-life balance somehow, and maybe I can achieve getting more money somehow because I can't survive, you know? And people are just struggling. Like, yeah, it's everybody's in a really bad situation. It's not good. It's not good. Then on top of that, we've had a new variation of COVID come through. So that has not been easy to deal with. But I think everybody's going to be happy that we've had the mandates lifted, essentially. So
exactly. And I kind of do feel that the more this election is delayed, like if this plays out to the very last possible day of May 21, that's like, over a month away, and over a month extra with all of our freedom, that there aren't vaccination checks anymore, and that there are only limited settings where vaccinations are being checked. That's going to impact that far-right anti-vax vote, I think. So I feel like for the government, the longer that this goes on, they might be able to perhaps, who knows here, but pull back some of those really angry people that were really anti-mandate.
Yeah, I think so. And then the last one we had was Animal Justice Party, and that was Sue and Linda. So that was a really good one as well, to have a look and see, how, like, I guess how climate change is actually affected by our meat consumption. That was a good one to really have a think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I do get the sense that more and more the people's overall diets, I think, are changing. I think that there's more visibility of vegan options around. I think people are, even if they're not going vegan, they're choosing less meat options. I think a lot of people, especially, in suburban areas, are eating less meat. And in some instances, meat, they were talking about the economics of it as well, where, cheaper meat than the kind of more expensive cuts, if you call it that, were always the cheapest option, but perhaps that's going to change and not always be the case. And so if we then just look at price, potentially, vegan diets and plant-based diets might actually become, and be, in some instances, they are already now cheaper options. And that conversation, I think, with AJP was good, because I personally didn't know a lot about the party, or I guess I always saw them as, okay, so they're a single issue party on animal rights and animal welfare, which is fantastic, but what about every other issue that's not animal related? But I do see now the really important part for them to have some representation in Parliament, whether that's state or federal, so that they can advocate and be the voice for animals. And so I think, I really do understand that point now. And it's kind of like the Greens as well, the Greens only have a small representation in Parliament in both state and federal, but they're able to be that voice for, essentially the working class. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that as well. I feel that, working class people are seeing the Greens as, their representative, because nobody else is. Nobody else is there. That's kind of how it's turned out. So now we move on to the election, and hopefully change for the better. Hey, hopefully things will kind of, because we've moved so far out of balance, hopefully the balance will kind of tip a little bit, and we'll create policy or push for policy that will be more for the everyday person, rather than these corporate and mining interests, and kind of bring things back for everybody to breathe a sigh of relief a little bit. And I don't know, I think one of the big things we need is wages growth, so that we can deal with everything else.
Absolutely. I think the Shadow Treasurer, the Labor Shadow Treasurer, has talked a lot about how wages have just flatlined. And it it is not surprising that wages have flatlined under a Liberal government. This is kind of baked into the policy. So it's tax cuts for the rich. It's putting pressure on the working class, the main block of mainstream society bears the financial burden for this country, and yet half of this oppressed class then vote back in that Liberal government. So it is, I think, a problem that we need to better get out there. It's not just Greens and the minor parties. Like Labor has to do a bloody good job in communicating like the ineffectiveness of this government and stop just backing in everything that the government is doing. Like stop agreeing with everything, just say this is there's a lot that has gone wrong, and that Labor's got a different vision and a way that we can bring more equality. And I totally agree that rising wages across the board is going to be beneficial in so many ways. The knock-on effect of that is so broad. And I'm really hopeful for balance of power and a minority government like we had back in Julia Gillard's days.
Yeah, I think so. A little bit more like socially aware of what's happening with the everyday people. More sort of, more of those policies that work for working class people, I think would be good. I think that's what we need. And people, I think that will help with people. If people can afford to pay for food, like that would help with people's mental health so much. If people had a shelter over their head, if they had food for their family, and water, like food, water and shelter, like it's not much to ask.
Basic
and
needs.
Education.
It's the bottom level of the pyramid.
I know, like we're just asking, please sir, can we please have food, water, shelter and education and health? Like it's just the basics. Like, come on. And then of course, technology would help people out Logan way as well, better NBN, so we didn't have this friggin' delay when we're recording these things as well. Better NBN would be good.
Yes.
Better NBN
for less delays on podcasts.
Yes, but also, people could start their own businesses like we talked about, like NBN would be great for everybody. Like, technology changes, things like that would be good. I guess we have to wait and see what's going to come. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we've got change about to happen. So that keeps me going because I think, wow, we're about to change the world. This is fantastic.
Yeah. Yep, I'm with you. I'm really hopeful. I think this, fingers crossed, I think this will be a really good outcome for all of us. So let's see how we go.
Okay. Well, you've been listening to Beyond the Rona. Captioned audio is available on our YouTube channel, or you can visit beyondtherona.com to catch previous episodes or to keep in touch. Good to talk to you, Tim.
Likewise. Thanks, Andrea.